Hello, this is Charles Bird. I initially intended this to be a topic in an episode of Random Thoughts, but decided that this would be better presented as the topic of a standalone video. If you are like me, you are encouraged by the protests against the lockdown. If you're like me, your heart is filled with pride in being an American at the sight of patriots standing against the government overreach. You are not alone in seeing something wrong with a picture when people are arrested just for being at the park, when people are being yanked from the bus for not wearing masks, and churches are being shut down. You're not alone when you are disgusted by the behavior of the quarantine Karens who snitch on their neighbors and use social media to shame people. You're probably thinking right now, these protests are great, but I don't have the time or the means to go to the big protests in the big city or the state capitol. You're in luck. I just happen to be an activist, and I have been one for nearly 25 years. I have worked for and against various causes and candidates over a quarter century. I have worked with large groups, small groups, and even by myself as a committee of one. Here are some ideas I hope you find helpful. Because you are risking arrest or getting fined, I strongly recommend you shop around for an attorney or a legal nonprofit that represents people in First Amendment cases. Do your due diligence when looking around. The nonprofit you think might be on your side might not take your case because they don't consider it big game, or because they're afraid they would appear anti-science to their donors. It's also possible you might find an attorney who is diametrically opposed to everything you stand for, but will take your case anyway because he understands and respects the law enough to know that free speech is for everyone and that the Bill of Rights are not null and void during times of emergency. Back in the good old days, I would have suggested advertising your protest group in social media. Unfortunately, these aren't the good old days. Social media platforms are either shutting down or threatening to shut down attempts to organize more protests. Also, these efforts are being met with psychotic, vitriolic, venomous responses from people who favor the lockdown, trust the official narrative, don't think for themselves, and are emotionally invested in the virus being some Captain Trips-style plague. These people will even wish death and imprisonment on other people just for holding a different opinion. What I suggest you do is limit your group to no more than 11 people. Limit it to folks you know personally and can trust and rely on. Operate clandestinely. Don't broadcast your punches. Agree on a time or location, show up, hold your demonstration, leave after 2 hours max, and hold the next one at a different location. If someone new wants to join your group, or if a member of the group wants to refer a friend you don't know, get that person's name and preferred contact info, and then vet him. Run his name against your county Superior Court case index and your state's Megan's Law database. It will save you a lot of headache. The last thing your group needs is a sex offender, a known thief, or some bar-brawling hothead among their number. You have to be very mindful of the sort of people you want to have standing with you. You don't want some flat earth 9/11 truth wingnut making you look bad. If someone wants to use your protest as a platform pushing a specific candidate or political party, don't let them. Keep it nonpartisan. I can't emphasize that enough. Hate groups have been trying to piggyback the anti-lockdown protests. Don't let them. If they make their presence known at one of your demonstrations, disavow them loudly. It should be pointed out that white supremacists have a working relationship with the hard left and that they stage their street battles. This goes back a long way. Delmar Dennis, who had infiltrated the Klan for the FBI in the 1960s, recalls this taking place. You can go back as far as the 1920s. In Indiana, two separate FBI investigations. One unit raided a KKK lodge, and another unit broke up a Communist Party cell, and it was discovered that the rosters of both organizations had an overlapping membership. It's very likely that these white supremacist or alt-right elements are working either with the pro-lockdown side or maybe the government itself to discredit the protests. Also, watch out for someone who is obsessed with using violence as a means to achieve political ends. At best, that person could be a mental defective who reads his delusions into your group's core values. At worst, he could be an undercover cop or Fed or some agent provocateur from the other side looking to entrap your group in criminal activities. Keep a sharp eye for that. When you are there, designate someone to be the group's spokesperson. This person must be telegenic, articulate, and knowledgeable. It would be a plus if this spokesperson comes from a customer service background. He or she will have been trained in how to deal with difficult and irrational people. And it doesn't get more difficult or irrational than Quarantine Karen and the social distance warriors. If you're engaged by passersby, the media, law enforcement, and counter demonstrators, refer them to the spokesperson. Also designate someone to be your group's videographer. He or she will be charged with the task of documenting everything. If you are encountered by police, the chances of getting arrested or ticketed could be slim. I've heard from more than one reliable source that most law enforcement officers don't really want to enforce these orders and that their hearts are with the people. If that's the case, the most that could happen would be a field investigation where they'll just take your name and number. Still, there is the risk that you might have a run-in with an overzealous cop looking to take out his frustrations on someone or to meet his arrest quota. If that happens, don't resist. Let him arrest you. Don't goad him into overreacting. Document everything. Contact your lawyer. File your complaint. If you are ticketed, contact your lawyer. File your complaint. Fight it in court. While you are there, do not obstruct traffic. Be courteous to pedestrian passersby. Stay on the sidewalk. Don't litter. Don't exchange profanities or insults with counter demonstrators. Avoid violence at all costs, or we'll just give the police an excuse to shut you down. Print out literature and distribute it. This will help members of the group avoid long arguments and debates with people. In this literature, you can establish that you don't believe that the virus is a hoax and that those who are vulnerable should do what's right for them. You can mention the economic problems and mental health crises stemming from the shutdown. Make sure, broken record again, to keep it nonpartisan. The main message is that you want your jobs, your freedom, and your lives back. Since you are operating clandestinely, do not leave contact information on the flyer. Also, it might be helpful to run some copies of the literature in Spanish, depending on the neighborhood where you're demonstrating or the part of the country where you live. Signs should read, "Reopen America." Reopen, insert name of state here. Reopen, insert name of city here. Freedom, not fear. Our rights don't end where your fear begins. Refrain from using profanity in signs or chants. Yes, I confess it can be cathartic to shout F Gavin Newsom, but profanity will cheapen the message you're trying to get across to people and will only undermine the credibility of your protest group and the movement as a whole. Bring flags. Show that you are patriots. You love your country and you feel the shutdown and cultural changes around are bringing America down the wrong path. You can march from one point to the other or have someone leading songs and chants, but I believe the best method would be the silent protest. This is a method I have seen in action at pro-life demonstrations, and it works like a charm. Stand silently, a few feet apart. Hey, we're responsible citizens. We're socially distancing, right? And just let the signs do the talking. If counter-demonstrators should show up, do not engage. Ignore their profanities, taunts, jeers, and insults. To paraphrase that great philosopher Rick Sanchez, we have seen what makes them cheer. Their boos mean nothing. If it does get to you, just put the signs over your face and start reciting the Lord's Prayer or anything else that might comfort you, such as a stanza from a favorite poem or lyrics from a favorite song. If counter-demonstrators should approach you, get the spokesperson and the videographer. Because counter-demonstrators are potentially violent, judging by the level of vitriol in their online commentary, I would caution against bringing children with you. Trump supporters will attempt to turn your protest into a Trump rally. Don't let them do that, and don't let them get away with that. Request that they leave the MAGA swag and gear in their vehicle and turn their shirt inside out if they wish to join you. If he refuses to cooperate, make sure the spokesman makes it clear to the media and passerby that the overgrown teenager in the red ball cap who is shouting insults and profanities at people, waving the Trump-Pence flag, and is using 2 parking spots to accommodate his pickup truck is not with your protest group, and that the views he's expressing do not reflect the views of the protest group. You must not allow Trump supporters to turn your protest group into a pro-Trump echo chamber. The mission and the message will get drowned out by the noise. This was something that I've seen happen with a local pro-life group, and it was very heartbreaking. Trump supporters, for all their talk of Trump derangement syndrome, which is their cute little name for whenever people apply critical thinking to Donald Trump, suffer from a selective amnesia when it comes to the misdeeds of the man they have invited into their hearts as personal Lord and Savior. They forget the part where he turned over control of the country to Birx and Fauci and watched as they did to America in just a few short weeks what Barack Obama attempted to do in 8 years. Reduce America from superpower to third world vassal state by deliberately tanking the economy, thereby getting the world ready for what Obama called the post-American future, or what George Bush Sr. called the New World Order. Trump stood there and watched as our churches and synagogues were shut down and our gun stores closed. Then he foisted a $6 trillion monstrosity of a spending bill on us, loaded with bailouts and kickbacks for himself, his son-in-law Jared Kushner, and their Brighton Beach mob-connected associates in New York. Donald Trump is not, by any stretch of the imagination, the hero of this drama, as much as the sycophants try to paint that picture. Another thing to chew on: Trump can fire Dr. Fauci anytime he wants to. Why doesn't he? Think about that. Also, there are Republican governors and mayors who have instituted their own draconian command and control measures. Some have done so enthusiastically, seeing this as an opportunity to turn their states and communities into their own little serfdoms and fiefdoms, and they are just as drunk on their newly acquired power as their Democrat counterparts are. Other Republicans reluctantly imposed economic shutdowns because they received pressure from the feds and ultimately Trump, because that's where the buck stops, or should, to impose them, because highway funding was more important to them than personal and economic freedom. So this movement is and should remain a nonpartisan protest against the chain of abuses being perpetrated by a bipartisan cacistocracy, not a campaign to re-elect Trump or to elect Biden or anyone else for that matter. Full disclosure, I am supporting Jacob Hornberger's presidential campaign, but if I were to join an anti-lockdown protest group or start one, I wouldn't use the protest as a platform to push Hornberger. There is a time and a place for that, and these protests are not it. Finally, have fun. Enjoy what you're doing. Wave at the motorists. Greet passers-by with a warm smile and a hello. Be happy, warriors. Keep morale up. Charles Bird signing off. If you have any ideas or input, I would like to see it in the comments below. Also, if there are any quarantine Karens or social distance warriors watching this, please be advised. I used to run Yahoo groups, MySpace groups, Facebook groups. I have a lot of admin experience. I know how to deal with trollish behavior. I know what delete and block buttons are for. So if you're going to disagree, do so without being disagreeable. Calling people racist and grunting the F word a lot, those aren't real arguments. All right. Think while it's still legal. I'll see you on the next installment of Random Thoughts.